Hi everybody, nice to see you. Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you to everyone who's joined for our Redesigning the Workforce Experience discussion, which is actually our third webinar in our series of leading out of lockdown. Today's discussion will be focused on the change that we've all seen in the world of work over recent months and the impact that it's had and will continue to have on our employee experience. Our session today will last around 40 minutes. If you have any questions, please pop them into the chat and we'll try and answer them as we go through in the session. If not, we'll make sure we follow up afterwards. So before we start the discussion, I'd like to introduce our experts we have joining us today and say a big warm welcome and thank you to them. Andrew Mortimer, Hannah Richardson, Rohini Bhalla-Gill and David Stockton. So the employee experience is often influenced by a company's physical workplace, the work-life balance the company provides, the culture of a company, and the technology that enables productivity. Over the last 4 months, COVID's impact every single one of these areas, and many companies now, or many companies were in crisis mode. And reacted in the moment, and now they're starting to take a step back and determine and design their future employee experience. So Rohini, in a world that's experienced so much change in such a short space of time, what have been some of the key insights for you in regards to what employees are now most concerned about when it comes to their employee experience?
The biggest and the most important is job security, right? And of course, that no organization in today's climate has full-on control over, right? So then that leads to communication. So employees are thinking, well, you know what? I know my job may not be secure. I get that, right? But how will my employer tell me? Will they tell me on the day? Will they be fair to me, right? So the biggest concern is job security. If we put that to one side, right, and think, okay, your job is secure and you've got the trust in me as an employer that I will do right by you, right? Then we can start looking at other things. An employee is looking at the physical aspect, Lisa. That, you know, it goes down to the bigger textural aspect, doesn't it, of employee journey experience. And the physical aspect. So again, safety, COVID's changed how we think. We're not allowed to hug anymore. We're not allowed to, I say allowed to in inverted commas, but we don't shake hands. These things that come naturally to us, right? So then we have to take it one step further and think physical space. Am I in an open plan office? Will I have meetings? These are the things employees, they write to us and they ask us, they're like, you know, yes, we're coming back to work. How will my office be? I used to sit next to 3 people and I'm not comfortable doing so. So these things are huge in mind. But also something we tend to forget about is culture, but culture not in an employee. I don't know a better way of saying this, but will I be forced to come into work if I'm not comfortable, right? I wouldn't say bullying because that's a separate thing altogether, and that's not it. It's will I be shamed into coming into work if my boss is there but I'm not comfortable to be at work and I can do my job at home perfectly well. So these things are all in employees' minds, and as HR, we get these questions on a daily basis. This morning I had someone say, a marketing person said, well, you know what, I can do my job perfectly well at home. And I'm just not comfortable coming into work. What do we say?
So it's that element of choice and the choice in terms of how that they can operate in a way that makes them feel safe and secure.
Exactly.
But this interesting thing around you were talking about, we can't guarantee jobs, but what employees are looking for is that sense of trust and security, that the communication will be there and that they will be dealt with in that right way. So interestingly, safety at its very is there at the very core, both from a health and well-being point of view, as well as, you know, from an employee's perspective around the trust that they have in the employer. So that relationship, you know, that the employee has with the employer, and the depth of that is even more important.
Exactly. And I think employers are almost still in a fight or flight mode. They need to keep businesses going, business continuity and all that. And they know they will treat employees fairly, but they're forgetting to communicate that. It's almost like a given. Of course, if I'm going to make you redundant, God forbid, I will make sure I look after you. But what about telling employees? You know, I'm a numbers person, as you know, Lisa, and there were a few studies done, right, over this time, as there would be, and 72% of employees wanted more reassurance about the financial implications of COVID on the organization. Now, that obviously translates down to their job security. And employers need to look at that. This is key. It's all coming down to trust in its basic sense, and communication. Things that we take for granted, things that, you know, we've been doing for decades and hundreds of years, but we are forgetting in the fight or flight mode. And this is what employees are looking for. This is, I say all, but this is it. This is all they're looking for.
Okay, and so consciously designing in opportunities to communicate into the employee experience, consciously designing in ways for employees to ask questions and you know, create that and build that relationship, I guess, is something that feels really critical now for organizations. Hannah, what are you seeing? What are you hearing?
So I think as it pertains to the workplace, Lisa, I think one of the aspects employers need to be highly mindful of is most businesses, if you want, have a way that they deliver service. And the way that service was delivered in a pre-COVID world is really different than how we need to deliver service in a COVID world. And I think it's really understanding what those shift impacts are and how that's resonating for our workforces. So we deliver international relocation services. And in a pre-COVID world, we have standards, if you want, in terms of service standards on how we deliver. What we are seeing is that the way that we have traditionally in a pre-COVID world deliver service, the needs, the requirements, the preferences of how our customers want to consume content, consume information, really receive those levels of assurance have evolved quite dramatically. So for us, it's now working with our people to understand what the switch changes and levers are so that they can continue to meet the successful experience outcomes of our customers, but at the same time ensuring that we're giving them the right tools and the right bandwidth to be able to deliver the new way of service delivery to meet those new sets of customer requirements and preferences and needs that we are seeing present because of the pandemic. So
this need for information, need for communication, we're seeing across the board there, and I guess, you know, with more and more people successfully working from home, and in fact, actually, quite often what I'm hearing is that's been one of the positives for both employee and employers. Andrew, how do you see this impacting the workplace longer term?
It's a very good question, Lisa. A very good question. Look, I think, yeah, I think the work, it depends really what the definitions of workplace, and I think, you know, so taking that and looking at it from you know, the workplace for me is what is the culture in which we are working. Yeah, because the workplace isn't necessarily the office, isn't necessarily the home. Yeah, it could be the dinner table, work with friends, talk about the organisation we work for, so on and so forth. I think what we've experienced really over the last 6 months, has been, it's been well documented. It's a social crisis rather than a financial crisis. And I think the social crisis, as a consequence, I think has prompted each of us as individuals to think and reflect. Yeah, and asking ourselves some probably deeper searching questions around who we are and what we expect. And coming back to the workplace, part of that is, what do we expect from the workplace? What do we expect from our employer moving forward? Look, there's been a lot of talk, and there's lots of the material being published on, sort of dynamic working from home, etc. And I don't propose to cover that in answer to this question, because I think, I'd like to bring in a topic that's slightly more controversial, if that's okay. And one that isn't, there's a lot of media coverage on it, but the actual specific question isn't being discussed. And it's one we as a large organization are asking a lot about this. And really it's the key cultural area of diversity and inclusion. So what do organizations mean about diversity and inclusion? What is a diverse culture? What is an inclusive culture? And I think on that front, and I think individuals, whilst working from home and being remote from the office, and not institutionalized by being in the office environment, have sought to ask themselves, well, actually, is this an organization that is diverse? Is it an organization that is inclusive? Do I feel part of this? Yeah, is this who I want to be part of? Is this organization's values aligned to my personal values? And then you ask yourself the question around, well, actually, if it's not, then what do I do about it? And what we've got to do in terms of ensuring that we retain our talent is encouraging people to ask that question of the organisation and work with the organisation to get the answer. And so, if I sort of use an analogy to try and represent that, Barclays, 70,000 staff globally, big offices in New York, London, Singapore, wherever else. And these offices are like modern day medieval castles. They're huge, they're powerful, they're strong. They really do play out all those sort of castle look and feels if we go back to medieval days. And these medieval castles, if we use that analogy, you've got a large wall and a moat, and that's the sort of building and the security and reception you need to get past to get into it. But surrounding the castle, you've got the villages and the farms. So you've got these big ivory towers, and they're surrounded by communities and the people who work in those communities and involved in those communities. And they are like the, say, medieval villages and farms. The question now, I know is starting to be asked by our employees is, well, actually, this castle, is it looking after the surrounding communities? How involved is it in those communities? Is it representative of those communities? And if it isn't representative, why isn't it representative of those communities? And where before we'd have the castle wall to protect that stuff coming into the organisation, that's no longer the case. I think COVID has removed those walls and really opened up organisations to start thinking more about that. And I think that's a big fundamental change. Look, and I think, from a diversity and inclusion perspective, there's been lots of discussion around gender. And the gender pay gap, and there's some work been done now. There's a lot more work that needs to be done. There's been much around this, like people of determination, ensuring that offices do have the facilities to allow individuals of determination to have access to those offices in some shape or form. But I think from a cultural perspective, one of the questions and challenges we're getting now is actually, what are you doing as an organisation around race? What are you doing as an organisation around ethnicity? Because that's not being discussed. It's not something that seems to be on the organisation's agenda. But if I come back to the analogy of the castle, the community in which you operate, so in the city of London, London, for that, multicultural, very diverse, etc. But how representative is Barclays, the institution, of the community and city in which it serves? And it's a subject. Ethnicity and race is a subject where there's a degree of uncomfortableness around that. And that uncomfortableness comes from the fact, let's be really honest, many of the leaders of the castles are individuals like me, you know, privileged individuals. Yeah, I'm white, middle-aged, well-educated, Anglo-Saxon with a British passport, and I'm a male. Yeah, and you know, we have, as a consequence, you know, created these sort of fiefdoms in a way. We've had that privilege. Yeah, and what we need to do from a privileged perspective is start asking ourselves the question to say, well, yeah, if I open up the newspapers, I switch on the TV, who do I see on the front page? Who do I see on page 2 or 3? Do I see people who represent me? When I come into the office, yeah, if I look at the management team, if I look at the board, yeah, do I see individuals similar to me in some shape or form from a race and ethnicity perspective? And I think culturally, I think that's going to be one of the biggest changes I think that will come out of this crisis, this social crisis, is big organizations, medium-sized organizations and small organizations will have to ask themselves questions around from a race perspective and ethnicity perspective, what is it they're doing to ensure they represent the communities in which they operate? Because the reality is, you know, as leaders, you know, if we don't get it right, the impact is there's a commercial impact to it. Yeah, you will disengage from those communities, and ultimately, yeah, it leads to a situation where you know, you're basically not engaged with the communities that you serve, and like the dinosaurs, become extinct.
So from an employee experience perspective, then, you know, organizations are having to really, you know, stand back, think about the values, what they stand for, and ensure at every point what the employee experience is reflective of the values that they stand for, and ensuring that
yeah. That's exactly it. I mean, Lisa, as leaders, as you know, as senior leaders in the organisations, you know, you've got to look at this and say, well, okay, yeah, am I creating the right environment where we can have a productive conversation about race? Yeah, yeah. Am I setting the ground rules for the conversations around race in terms of, yeah, let's ensure we get comfortable being uncomfortable. Yeah, you know, let's listen, open our ears and open our minds, and don't interrupt people. Let them tell us, yeah, honestly, what they feel and what they think, you know, and what they experience, and let them feel their sort of confidentiality around what they're saying, and create support networks around them that allow them to feel safe to then effectively take some of these conversations and topics that are in the shadows and bring them out into the light. Yeah, if you don't bring them out into the light, you don't educate privileged people like me. Yeah, and that's what we have to change. And I think that's part of the change we will see from a cultural perspective in the workplace moving forward.
So David, what are you seeing, and you know, what's your experience when it comes to what organisations now need to think about in relation to the culture that they create?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. I think Andrew's point around the community is something that as we emerge through, I'm not saying from, but emerge through this whole situation the world has found itself in, you know, part of our sort of vision and mission is empowering better communities for better outcomes for all. Is, you know, we have 59 different nationalities in our workforce, and every nationality has a different way of approaching this. You know, you think of classical business resilience that's gone on, and you know, you create a business backup process, and the first thing you respond, then you look to recover, then you look to thrive. Many people, you know, we're all, you know, effectively in the same storm. We've all just been on different boats, and those boats are still sailing. So some have still to respond. I think the response is ongoing. It's not something you can say, well, I've done that phase, now I go back into recovery. We are still responding to something changing every single day, whether that's a local law, a regional law, a different peak, a spike in numbers, etc. That has a massive effect on your workforce. And you know, that, I think what we've certainly a lot of us have been able to do is create an empathy with our employees that allows them an opportunity to speak up, because there's been incredible fear. You know, different cultures adapt to things differently. Their exposure to life cycles of different things again affect people massively. You know, the mental health and well-being of, from the CEO to the person who, you know, is just starting out on their career, can be entirely different. You would expect that the top deals with it very well and perhaps the lower ranks don't, but it can actually be in reverse. So I think that's something that the workplace has had to change. And, from what I think Rani was saying, the workplace environment of safety and security is absolutely critical. Repurposing the office, whether that's at home, whether that's at a cafe, or whether that's in the building that you used to call your office, is absolutely critical. Because the way I do a sort of once a month video, live video to all the staff, and then weekly engagements with everybody. But one of the things we learned very early on in March was people needed to feel assured, about their job, how it affects them and their family, but knowing when they would come back to a form of prior normality, that ability of being able to be alone and isolated in my home. So to Andrew's point, the castle, you're in that home castle, and then all of a sudden you're thrown in with all these people that used to be your colleagues and friends, and now you don't know where they've been, what they've been doing, but you have the assumption that I must work with them. So that flexibility to allow people the freedom once they know it's safe, and how you purpose your office with segmentation, with access, etc. Whether that comes back to giving them kits that they can come back to the office with, is really, really important, because that trust, so that perhaps was lacking before. You want to work from home? Why? What for? Has got to disappear. So if we're able to manage now through outcome performance, so it's outcome-based performance, which in certain roles, whether that's commercial before, was easily measured. Perhaps it's not so much, from a marketeer. Perhaps it's not so much from a compliance person who is usually walking the corridors to check and balance. But actually, what we were all able to do was pivot really quickly and adapt to a different way of working, which for me and our organization, I think we've become far more productive and definitely, far more trusting of the ability for people to not have to be seen in the office from 8 until 6, or, whatever that timing was. There is a building, it's very safe, it's very secure. And for every reason you might think, my kids are at home, I've got someone coming around the house, there's a building here, come and use it because it's safe. And, we can't guarantee that it's 100% safe, but you can't do that in your home, because you get a delivery, you get someone coming by, you have to start somewhere. So I think that impact on the employer and employee has been dramatic. But there is a way through it, and that responsiveness to that leads to that recovery, and then allows you to thrive again, both in your role, in your person, and obviously in your career.
So you touched on it previously about mental health and well-being. What are you seeing? What are you experiencing? And what are the things now that you're having to think about for your employees on a longer-term basis in relation to that?
So look, I think for me, well-being has to be led, from the top, because if you don't believe in it, then you're going to fail. You're playing passive noises to the in vogue thing at the moment. And certainly, from personal experiences, that I've been through in my career, it is absolutely critical, and you've got to be able to share that. So whilst we're a very diverse workforce, from what the term of blue collar to white collar to manufacturing, etc. And so we've got all different types of people that are part of our team. And so when we engage with external experts to help us with mental health well-being, and having accessibility from top to bottom, bottom to top to that program online, the first time we did it with the external service providers, there was probably 100 people. The next time there was 400 people. And it is not being seen anymore as a taboo. So it's actually part of our health and safety briefings. It is part of understanding where some of the challenges are, and nobody wants to lose somebody or have the threat of losing somebody on their watch at whatever level of the organization you want to do. And as I said, this has affected people in dramatic ways, people perhaps you wouldn't expect to be affected, but they have. And so that has to be on a program. For me, it has to be part of, an attractiveness to employees coming in, that yes, we want you to do the job. Yes, we want you to perform. But we're also going to help you to do it. Not just in the typical CBT training of courses, etc., but actually actively engaged in employee welfare. So having a dedicated employee welfare team that has trained psychologists to help with you and help with perhaps some of the challenges that some people are facing. And just think now, globally, people are struggling to travel. So if your mind is made up that I want to go back to my point of home, because we're all guests, and you can't do that, imagine how that affects you. You feel it's your company's fault that you can't go home. No, it may be your government's fault because you can't get there. They're still on lockdown. So being able to have intervention quickly, I think, is key.
Yeah. So really, sorry, go for it, Andrew. Yeah.
Right. So can I just build on one point that David was saying? And I think, on the mental well-being, aspect, again, is another topic that is important, I think, to bring out of the shadows into the light. And certainly, in our own organisation, one of the things we experience, we've got quite a young demographic. So we've got individuals in their late 20s, early 30s. Majority are expats, so they're away from home. A number of them are single, so they basically live in apartments on their own. When they were unable to come to the office, some struggled. So these are well-educated, well-paid individuals. If you met them, very extrovert, very good at what they do. But I think to David's point, sometimes you'll be surprised as to how some of us struggle when there isn't that routine, when there isn't that face-to-face engagement, being part of a team, coming to the office, etc., etc. And I think, back to the cultural piece, I think bringing that topic of mental well-being out into the sort of the spotlight, and actually some storytelling. Each of us being comfortable as leaders to talk about our own experiences and encouraging others, I think is incredibly powerful. And then having the support networks around that, of course, to take that forward. But I think, it's the more we can encourage people to talk about it, about their own experiences, the better.
But I think
so again, go on. Sorry, go ahead, Hannah.
So I was going to say, but I think to Andrew's point as well, I think that's then really much about the culture that's being created as a result of COVID, that we are able actually to create a culture of openness, transparency and trust, so that people feel that they can actually speak openly and freely about how they're truly feeling, which I think actually for humankind is a great step forward. But I think this is also about making sure the permissions are made very, very clear, that it's absolutely okay and fine, and that we're creating a culture to enable that to come to life.
So Hannah, you make a really good point. Sorry, Lisa.
No, God, David, no, it's fine.
You make a really good point, and I think this is where this technology that we're all using now, and obviously people are watching on, has allowed us to actually read a little bit more into people. Because down the phone, for instance, you wouldn't necessarily know that X is not feeling too great, but actually when you get them on Teams or on Zoom, you can see there's something not there. That person is not that person that is vibrant that I'm used to seeing. And so you've almost got your initial intervention, which allows you to have slightly more probing questions. And I'm absolutely, if I can get in front of people face to face, it's far more powerful. But this has been, I think, a really interesting medium to get to a wider audience that perhaps wouldn't be engaged typically, not just your direct and indirect reporting, but a much, much wider way to a large workforce. So I think this technology is actually helping us, and that balance then with the office space, whatever that might look like, and team dynamic is very, very important.
But then, David, doesn't this come back to communication again and trust?
Yeah.
It's all kind of coming back to that the basis of it all, that perhaps we've taken for granted.
Agree, absolutely. I think, everyone said the same thing of, it's okay to talk, but I think you have to put that time aside to have that direct conversation with people.
I think it's the shift. I think the shift you're describing is the conscious designing in of ways to communicate, how to communicate, ways for your employees as they go through their experience, opportunities for them to be able to receive the support that they need, but actively designing for that and actively designing it into the experience. You know, David, when you're thinking about talent attraction and retention, have you now started to think about how your strategies might need to change, and what you might need to do to actually attract and retain the very best?
Look, absolutely, and I think we're all now in a different world. If you think now of, you know, effectively 2 employee needs, you've got the sort of the person who wants to move because they want to grow their career, and then you've got the needer. I've got no job, so I need a job. Historically, it's always been about, I've lost my job, I need to move on, I want to change countries, I want to do other things. But this has become really, really prevalent. And for us in our, you know, very diverse organization, a global skill. So typically we would go to, you know, other countries, we'd try and attract talent here if we could, because it, you know, you already understand the culture, you understand the region, etc. But that global skill level, so you've got a global awareness with a local skill knowledge, is a big attraction. I think, you know, you have to be more dynamic than ever. The days of interviewing face to face have changed beyond recognition, and I'm really pleased to see that, you know, the HR business partners, which is what they are. You know, I hate the term. I'm from HR. You're a business partner. We can't make decisions. You are the first chance for us to actually understand a person who's looking to join our organization. Why? What is it that's attracting you? And so now we're starting to see video pitches, you know, from, if you've got 2 or 3 minutes, you know, we've seen it on TV with people trying to be pop stars. All of a sudden people are now trying to get into different roles. You get a good insight into their drive and their commitment, etc. It will never take away that human interaction at some point. And equally, you think you've hired the best person, 6 months later you realize, I've made an error. But it's a start. So I think that dynamic learning, you know, that whole way of technology, that we can use it, how we can connect, how they can onboard, how we can develop them much better. You know, what does induction look like? It's not about wandering the corridors and having a 30-minute meeting with anyone anymore. We've actually now got a traceability from a compliance point of view, that you do understand the policies and procedures because you've read them, it's recorded, etc. And your accessibility to be able to do that, I think, is really important. But I think one of the things that we will certainly look a lot more for now is resilience. You know, resilience in the person, not just about the job that you're going to do, but your resilience to deal with whatever's going on in the bigger, wider, potentially uglier world.
So Rohini, are you seeing something very similar, Rohini? I can see you nodding away.
Yes, no, we are hugely similar. The whole, and we're talking about talent attraction and also retention. Now build into that performance management, and appraisals, all of that's changing. What competency? So that, you know, David mentioned resilience. Resilience wasn't one of the competencies for every role before, for example, right? Now, especially for senior ones, it absolutely is. I'm talking about talent, getting talent attraction. You've got tests now that you know, I've just finished 3 stages for a client and recruit, you know, helping them recruit. The guys are based in the UK, and these guys have been doing tests all remotely, panel discussions all remotely, and they've got through. It saves time, it saves money, it's huge. And especially if this is how business is going to be going ahead, we need to see how comfortable they are doing this as well, right? And so it falls in quite nicely with, as David was saying, this new technology, what we're doing now. We need to use it every step of the way, whether it's talent attraction, whether it's talent retention, whether it's business continuity, the whole lot. This needs to come through.
I think
please, Hannah, after you.
So I was going to share, I think one of the biggest challenges we have as leaders of businesses is this aspect around resiliency. Because are we really talking about mental resiliency? I think the question then is very much, what support are we giving to people to enable them to become more resilient in what is only going to continue to be a highly ambiguous world? And when you look at people's appetite for change in a pre-COVID sense, most humans aren't that comfortable with ongoing change. We're creatures of habit, and a large proportion of any given workplace actually like to come in and typically, you know, do their work, go home, come back, do it the next day. At the moment, the world that we're living through and working through in a COVID sense has really reshaped the whole of everything that we know. And ambiguity is a real difficult piece for all people, employees, and especially leaders to work through, because the one thing that business and especially stock markets like is certainty. And the one thing we don't have right now is certainty. So the whole paradigm of how businesses are structured and respond, if you want, to macro environmental forces is dramatically changed. The global landscape has changed. And I think it's about paring it back in terms of, I totally agree, this is about resiliency, but what are the packages that we're putting together to support our people who naturally haven't had to step up through these gears of just working through layer after layer after layer of grey. And again, there are not that many within a typical organization who love these multiple layers of grey. And that's the challenge I think we all have, to put in these resiliency or leadership type trainings to enable our people to have those core skills or foundational skills to be able to continue. Because as we know, COVID's not going. You know, this I feel is potentially going to be, for many businesses, potentially a multi-year approach until there is a vaccine and a global immunization program. So, you know, COVID's not going to just suddenly, you know, disappear in the next 60, 90 days. So I think everything we're talking about here really does almost now have to sort of have practical, tangible outputs to support people as we continue to try and work our way through the grey to establish direction of where our businesses need to go fundamentally to remain sustainable.
I think,
Andrew, I think you were going to add to a point there.
Yeah, I think Lisa, yeah, we talked about, you know, sort of the attraction and retention of talent, and as an employer, you know, we're looking for resilience. I think, yeah, another element to that, you know, sort of flipping it the other way around is what is the employee and what is the candidate looking for? And I think, yeah, employees and candidates now are looking to be part of an organization, or to join an organization, or be part of a, you know, a following where they feel an association, an affiliation, where their values, their objectives are aligned to the values and objectives of the organization. And I think that's something, again, I think that's going to become far more evident moving forward, is that organizations are going to have to ensure that, from an attractiveness perspective, that association, people's, you know, employees association with the brand and prospective employees association with the brand is aligned. Because otherwise, particularly sort of the, you know, Generation Z millennials, they'll choose to go somewhere else, because they'll say, actually, look, you know, that's I don't want to be part of this. This isn't the sort of firm I want to be associated with. You know, I don't, you know, if I'm out with, you know, friends over drinks, they say, who do you work for? I want to be able to talk that I work for an organization that I'm proud to work for. I want to be associated with, not the opposite to that. And I think attraction and retention of talent is also ensuring that there's that alignment of the organization's sort of vision, strategy, and values with the sort of vision, you know, vision and values of the individual as well.
So thinking about, you know, everything that everyone said so far, you know, really from the very, you know, start of an employee's journey, if you like, from the point at which you attract right through to the way in which they leave, it feels, in everything that we've been talking about today, every single part of that employee's journey needs to be rethought and redesigned effectively. And you know, if you think about that from an organization's point of view, that's, you know, quite a big job, you know, and where do you start? So thinking about that from a strategic point of view, what do you now see as the top 5 most significant areas of strategic priority from an employee journey and employee experience point of view that organizations now need to really start to think about how do they redesign to be fit for the world that we find ourselves in. So open, let's start with David.
Okay, sorry, Lisa. I was just thinking, who's going to go first then? Look, I think it's almost a rehash of what we've all said. The priority now is, I think we haven't got time to wait, it's proactiveness. So that first strategic intent is the priority. It is being proactive. That commitment to safety and security, you know, the cleanliness, the flexibility, the safety, most importantly, the connectivity, which then brings you into setting that communication priority. You know, who you're going to do it to, when you're going to do it, how often you're going to do it, what's the type of messaging. One message will not fit all. You can't stand there and speak as the leader, blah, blah, blah. You've got to tailor it to the audience. And that audience will differ probably daily, weekly, monthly, and will have to adapt to the ever-changing environment. I think from an employee point of view, skilling yourself up. I mean, we've seen an enormous amount of employees doing their own drive, you know, through LinkedIn, through other platforms to reskill themselves. We've all seen the number of certificates that people have got about being I'm COVID ready, etc. That's really encouraging that people are actually doing it off their own back to go out there and look for new ways of doing it, because I think, as everyone said, your attractiveness in the marketplace is no longer that, you know, I'm the greatest banker, I'm the greatest HR business partner. You have to be a great business partner, banker, financier, people engager, communicator, and wrap it all up. And then how do you package yourself? Because I think our generation, you know, we have gone through this, we are going through this, we've been through different forms. But that next generation that's perhaps going through the education process at the moment, they're going to be in a very, very different work environment. And who knows, you know, what comes next? No one on the planet could see anything like this coming. Financial crash pales into insignificance. This is something that has affected everybody and will continue to do so. And if this has done it once, what could happen again? We don't know. It's not doomsday mongering, but it's being prepared. So that proactiveness of that resilience to your own skills, to your business skills, to your employees' engagement is absolutely paramount. So for me, that's the sort of 5 things of what we need to do strategically.
Thanks, David.
Lisa,
Sure.
Lisa, I was going to say, I think.
Sorry.
I was going to say, Lisa, I think if we look at this through the lens of technology and what that means for sort of talent acquisition strategies and onboarding and retaining key talent, I think companies really do now need to consider technology becoming a broader part of the wider benefit package that is actually put into offers for new hires and talent. So we are, you know, there are many companies now rolling out more bring your own device scheme, choose your own device, in terms of the tools that employees are going to actually use to deliver their work. And I think what COVID has done has really brought a more dramatic lens on the fact that companies need to provide devices and software that employees want to use, because there's a much greater reliance now on the technology tools and suites being made available. Because if we don't, what it will mean is employees will just have a more frustrated employee experience. And clearly, if they're delivering services, be it content, service, products to customers, then it just kind of spirals. And clearly, you know, all organizations right now are trying to obviously deliver a more heightened customer experience as well. And I think when you just sort of look at what's happening out there across technology, with M365 Suite releasing more than 100 functionality enhancements per month, I think this just gives you an idea of the cadence of releases and ongoing innovation that companies like Microsoft and others are driving out again, you know, to ensure that we, in a virtual sense, can be more connected and human than maybe going back to where Andrew was sharing about the medieval castles, because that is the only way that we can connect and be human together. And the gap needs to be leveraged through technology. And I think it's really ensuring that every company has a unified comms platform to collaborate and connect. And I think it's as simple as this: those companies who don't have probably already failed as a result of COVID, or are failing as we speak. You know, and this transcends back into employees. You know, we're all used to purchasing and operating high-end products at home, but the clear message is people want to use these same products, not inferior devices, when they're delivering their work.
Thanks, Hannah. Rohini, I think you were going to build on a point.
I was. I think going ahead as employers, we need to look at and factor in of mental well-being costs in our budget.
Okay.
We need to do that from now. We're working on 2021 budget now. How many employers, how many of us have that cost? Not many, because it's all about reducing costs. But this is that one cost that needs to go on, along with technology, as Hannah said. It's so important, right? But this mental well-being is huge. And right now, companies aren't seeing it, possibly, because they're so driven by margin, which I get, I absolutely get. But employee well-being will, you know, we need the mental well-being aspect of it to feed in. Otherwise, it's not going to work. It's not going to work.
Okay.
We will go off sick for months, right?
Which has a huge cost in itself, right?
Huge. There's almost penny wise, pound foolish, if that makes sense. We need to do it, and this needs to be done now for 2021. It has to be done.
As a real key strategic priority. Great. Okay, guys, I'm very conscious of time. We've gone over a few minutes, but it's been a really, really insightful and a fabulous discussion. So thank you. Thank you to all our panelists. Thank you to all that have joined for such an interesting discussion around, you know, the future employee experience, and as employers, as employees, all the things that we now need to be thinking about. So it's clear more than ever, I guess, from now, there are some really, you know, really key challenges that organizations need to bring into their conscious and start designing, you know, in terms of how they create the right employee experience to enable them to meet their commercial goals, because, you know, it's such a fundamental part of it. So thank you, guys. Please keep an eye on LinkedIn for our up and coming future discussions, and I hope to see you soon. Thanks.